So I have two of these. These are Sopwith Camels, and they're both 1/72nd scale. Basically the same model kit, just one is a slightly newer box. And they're both by Academy, basically the same model. And I'd like to do one for beginners and one for more advanced modelers. So let's see what we come up with. So this is going to be the more advanced build, and I'm going to be using the full array of all the tools that I have and paints. And so here we are, starting with removal of the parts from the sprues. I use side clippers and then a nail file and sanding paper to get rid of some of the edges. You can see some of these extra pieces or parts that are stuck out from the mold, and so I sanded those smooth or filled them depending if they were recessed or stuck out. So this is some filler. Now we're putting the fuselage together. There's not a lot of detail in this cockpit, and I didn't really want to spend a lot of time on the cockpit. I wanted to spend most of the time doing rigging as well as building an engine. So I put the fuselage together and used the regular Revell contactor glue, just a medium thickness glue, but there's still a gap here, and as you can see I'm filling it with some of the Tamiya putty, and once that is done we'll then sand it off just like this section here on the wings. So I'm really lightly sanding this. I want to get rid of all the rough edges and make it a bit smoother, but I don't want to lose the extra detail. I did want to make the panel lines more obvious, so I used my scriber to deepen these, and then I'm now gluing on the tail and elevator with just the regular medium thickness glue, and it goes on pretty easily, but just have to make sure that it lines up. There's obviously a gap there, and so I used this plastic putty from Vallejo, which is very easy to use and wipe off, and it fills those gaps very nicely. Now I'm gluing on that cowling with the medium thickness glue. Now the cowling, it has to be lined up at the bottom, as you can see there, for the engine parts, and then these are the wing joiners, and some parts have to be sanded off. Now the other thing about these parts is when I dry fitted them is that the lower portion actually is supposed to be part of the wing. It's not supposed to be visible. As you can see, it very obviously is, so I sanded that down so that it would drop into there, and then I'm going to end up filling it to make it covered. So this is both the left and the right wing, and now I'm making sure that when they dry that they are aligned correctly. I wanted to add some detail here. As you can see there, there's just little pieces of stretched out sprue, and the Sopwith Camel has a wire control system, and so I'm making the little actuators or levers for that, both the on the wings for the ailerons as well as for the elevator. I just used regular glue here because it's not painted or primed, and it helps the stretched sprue to stick. You have to use the medium thickness glue because if you use the thin stuff, it just melts the sprue and it then disappears. So the thicker stuff definitely lasts longer. Now it's time to prime. This is the top wing, and I'm coming back to the rigging because it takes a while to dry. So now the one portion is dry, I can stretch it across the other. I initially tried to do this with the regular glue, but it became very frustrating as it just wasn't sticking. So now I'm trying to get it to stick with super glue. And then I trim off the extra, and then you're left with this rigging attached to the side and to the underside of the elevator. Here I'm doing the ailerons and putting a little bit of super glue on there to get it to stick. And once that part dries, then we can then do the next section. So this is priming, and then painting. I'm using the airbrush as it gives a very nice even finish, and it gets in all the little cracks and crevices. And this is an olive drab from Tamiya. Now the underside, as this was made of linen, I wanted to accentuate the ribbing. So I tried to do this with some white, but I think I ended up putting on too much paint, so this wasn't quite as visible as I would have liked. But here I am just doing it by brush, and I'm doing it very irregularly. Now we're back to doing some more rigging. and this is now for the elevator cables, and I'm still just using regular plastic model cement for the glue to get it to stick. It sticks pretty quickly, but takes a little while to dry. So what I'll end up doing is just stretching it out and pulling it once that is dry. But this is just regular stretched sprue, and I do have a separate video on how to stretch sprue. I'll put it up above, and you can watch that if you have questions on how to stretch that sprue. So now we're working on the other side, and I had actually measured all of these before gluing them and cut them slightly longer, but I had a very long piece of stretch sprue. Okay, now we're priming the underside of the model, and as well as the fuselage. This is the regular gray Vallejo primer. I like to prime all of my models because I find that the paint sticks much better once it's been primed. So now I'm doing the underside of the lower wing. This is a biplane, and I'm trying to accentuate those ribs that'll show through the linen. I guess originally when the linen was white, it was obviously much clearer, but this is more of a tan color. This shows some yellowing of the linen, and so I went with this light tan color. And as you can see, I'm painting both the underside of the top wing as well as the bottom wing, and this is the top wing here. So at this point it still does show up, but I think I put too much on. I did end up going for a slightly lighter color. As you can see, I did a second coat because it was just too dark. I hand painted the details here. There's a little wood spar in the wing at the top, and I just hand painted this. Is much easier to do it with the brown paint. This is just regular brown paint from Tamiya. Now next I'm painting the struts that join the upper and lower wings, and this is with brown because they're made out of wood, and I'm painting both sides inside out as well as the front and back, and just did this by hand. Now I'm back to stretching the sprue here for the elevator cables. I fiddle around with different methods of doing the rigging and attaching it. I tried initially the glue with just a regular model glue. It was not great. I tried here with some super glue, and it just took a long time of holding it to get it to finally sit. And as you can see here, now I've ended up pulling it off, which is very frustrating. So I glued that back on, and now I'm on to the underside of the wing. This section here is supposed to be silver, and so to get a very nice silver color, I'm first painting it black. That'll let the silver shine through much easier, and gives you a better overall color. So black dried first, and then put the silver on. It actually ended up needing multiple coats, and I didn't feel like taping off the wings, but probably should have, as that gives you a much nicer color and more even distribution. So now I'm painting the cables black, and that's just done by hand with a little paintbrush and some black paint. I do use the black primer as it sticks to pretty much anything. And now it's time to paint the front of the fuselage white. In this particular model, there are some white and red stripes, and so the base is white. Once that was dry, I masked off the area that I was going to be painting with some just standard Tamiya masking tape. I decided not to use the decals, and so I'm going to end up painting this section with some stripes, red stripes later on, but here we are painting the rest of the model with the same olive drab color. It's a little dark for most of the olive drabs that I've seen, but that's the color it comes with Tamiya. And now I'm peeling off the masking tape, and that's showing you that I had a good seal, and there wasn't much drippage or leakage. I wasn't very happy with this engine. As you can see here, the engine comes pre-molded into the front, and it just looks not great. So I thought, well, maybe I can just drill out the holes on the side of the rotary engine, but I ended up deciding to make another engine. And so here in this section I'll show you how I'm going to make this engine. I have some styrene stock. These are tubes and rods that you can buy from most hobby stores, and I'm just using regular styrene cement here to get that basic shape of the engine. I did make sure that the propeller would go through that tube that I put in the middle. I drilled out the section here for the engine, and then trimmed off the extra part of the cylinder so it would fit. And this, obviously you have to leave this to dry for a long time, because otherwise it'll fall apart. So I'm just using my side nippers, and it ended up coming with quite a nice result. I did want to get that cylinder look with the ridges for cooling, and so I used, this is 0.1 millimeter thick copper wire, and I made several of these and then glued them on at the back so that you wouldn't see them so much from the front. Now we're putting on the rods here, the connecting rods, and this is just out of simple solder wire. I think it is 0.5 millimeters, and so it just required several attempts. As you can see here, it was a little frustrating. It kept falling off, and then eventually the glue would get all over the tweezers, and they'd stick together. So this was kind of a frustrating task, but after a while I finally managed to get them all lined up. So then just trim off the extra with the side nippers. Now here you can see the last two. It actually worked out much better once I stuck it down to a tongue depressor, and then I got the thing to stay where it was supposed to. So connecting rods go on, and then we have to wait for them to dry. As you can see, that one is not dry, and now it's stuck all over the tweezers. I really should have wiped that off before picking it up again. But when you're on your 34th try, trying to get it to line up, it does get very frustrating. And finally, it goes on. Now, after a while, it is dry, and I'm now cutting off the excess, and now we're going to do priming. This is with Vallejo Gray Primer, and then painted it silver with the airbrush, and then I finally did some weathering. This is with Tamiya Panel Line, the black. Now, to do this correctly, you need to have some sort of acrylic underneath, and then enamel on top. The enamel is the panel line accent, and so you can wash it off with an enamel cleaner and won't take off the paint. Now, the inside of this cowl required a little bit of scraping out and cutting, but I finally managed to get it to sit right where I wanted to, and then repositioned it from the front so that I could see that it was in the middle. And now we're adding super glue. You can add as much super glue as you want to the sides, as long as it doesn't come out. Now we're on to the tail section. Because I'd already put the sprues and rigging on, really, it was difficult to mask off and spray paint this, so I did it by hand, and just used that tan color on the underside to match the wings, and require a little bit of maneuvering around those wires so as not to rip it off. So now it's time to clear coat the model. This is for application of the decals, so I'm just sealing this in top and bottom, and I now paint the inside of the cockpit. And this is just a straight brown color. I also hand painted the edge around the cockpit. This is the just the trim area. Now the skid here is also made out of wood, so I painted that brown, and you got to make sure you get in all those little crevices and so on. As I said before, I actually had done a lighter color on top of the underside for the linen cover, but it didn't look quite right on the tail, so I did the same process, which is the darker one first and then the lighter one, and it's just not as clean as putting on the airbrush. Now, to put the decals on, I do use the decal softeners. Use microsol and microset, the blue and the red containers, and that usually does a pretty good job of helping these to set. So as you can see, they're starting to wrinkle out as the softeners take effect. That's the top one. The bottom one, I realized that the decal was right in the middle of these control wires, and so I cut the decals. It's so important to cut the decal before you stick it in water, because once you stick it in the water, it becomes very difficult to cut and have it stay in place. It tends to slide around. So as you can see, I was struggling a little bit to get them to line up. I tried using a softening solution to get it to warp around the super glue, but finally ended up having to just use a scalpel or a blade and cut that decal so that it could slide up against that rigging there. And so finally I could get them to kind of line up as best as I could. Adding extra softening solution here on the top to try and get it to take that shape. Now, as I said before, I wasn't happy with using these red decals. It didn't line up correctly, and so I just masked it off and sprayed it, and I think it came up with a really good result. It didn't take too much extra effort to do this. It wasn't that there were 30 different areas to mask off, but one of the disadvantages of putting masking tape on is sometimes you rip the paint off, which, as you can see, I did here for the underside, and we'll have to touch that up. So using my tweezers then to get the rest of the masking tape off, and I had a reasonably good result, but you can see I did have some bleed through of some of that red. Now here's the olive drab just being hand painted on, and also using some white paint to paint the bleed through, and it ended up with a much better result. This is with just regular gloss white paint. Now we're drilling out the holes that have been filled with paint, and we're going to use just regular model glue to glue the landing gear in. This has not been painted yet, so we'll just paint it while it's on here because we've got some extra detail to add. And then our little landing gear slat. Glue this in, and then I'm going to make sure to line it up so that it sits correctly and doesn't look lopsided. Some extra paint going on to touch up the cowling because it didn't quite paint the way I wanted to. Now it's time to make the gun. It's a simple little gun here. They had a little machine gun, or two little machine guns that would shoot through the propeller, and I painted this with a silver metallic paint. But this gun also had a little sight in the middle, and so I cut off a piece of sprue and added that in, and then lined it up as I was able to. And that worked out quite nicely. And then it's time to glue that gun into the model. Just make sure you don't rip off that little piece that you added. Now, these decals here are an absolute pain to deal with. They're a pain for the simple model as well as the more advanced model here that I'm making. They did not stick well. They don't follow the curve very easily, and I tried multiple times to get them to sit correctly. I finally ended up waiting for it to dry and then gently scraping off the excess, but I just could not get them to soften enough. So I used this very sharp blade to scrape off the extra, and once that was done, then I tried to put some more softener. That didn't work, and finally ended up having to paint the extra section with the red, white, and blue, and finally it looked halfway decent. These decals also were a little difficult, especially the top section, because you want to line them up. And so if you get stuck with these decals not lining up and they're kind of not moving anymore, you can float them again with some extra water or some setting solution, but it's important you try and get those two lined up. Don't do these on different days and wait for them to dry. You need to get them so you can move them around, as you can see here, so that they both line up with each other and don't look like they're at weird angles. It required a lot of finessing and then getting one to sit on top of the other there. These are the decals for the side, and they went on fairly easily. Once you start adding decals, it's very easy for your finger to rip them off until you've glued them down. Just be careful how you hold the model. Here's the round dowel for the other side, and as you can see, it's not sitting down quite like I want it to, so some extra setting solution will help it to bend. Same thing with these tail decals with the number. You got to make sure you do these on the same day and get them to line up while they're still pretty fluid, because otherwise they will look really stupid and not be a straight line, and it'll be almost impossible to fix. Now I needed more rigging, so here's a quick video. As you can see, I pulled too fast and it wasn't quite soft enough, so there's just any candle and you can see how it starts to melt, and I'm pulling and then stretch it out. I wanted to make all the rigging that a normal Sopwith Camel has, and so I do make sure that rigging is as straight as possible because I hate having to pull it straight. And after doing all this rigging, I was reminded again of how much I hate World War I planes because of all the rigging. Now with the propeller, I wanted to add some texture to it as well as different colors, so I tried some oranges, some light browns, dark browns, and was hoping that would then shine through. So it's brown, and all kinds of different shades of that going through, and then finally the final dark brown, making sure the streaks were in the direction of the propeller, which I then accentuated with my finger. The front metal part was painted with a stainless steel color, and then once that was dry, I put on some panel line accent and then sprayed it to seal it all in. Now it's time to mount that, and I made sure that when I made that new engine that it would fit perfectly, and here's the cap going on. Now the landing gear I had glued into place, and now we're painting this with just a regular brown. It required 2 coats because I didn't prime this and I'm not doing it by airbrush. The paint was a little thin, and so I needed 2 coats to go on and cover it fully without having the grey shine through. Now I'm painting some of the rigging while that landing gear dries, just doing it with a very fine brush and black paint, and it helps it to make it more visible and look like actual rigging. So one of the challenges with doing rigging is if it's in overlapping areas, is that you can't get the brush in to do all the different areas. Here's the wings, and you got to do inside and out. It's a lot easier to do this while the top wing is off. And here's the other side. Now the next step is to mount the lower wing onto the body, and looking back, I don't think that I pushed this in quite hard enough. It was reasonably good, but probably should have lined it up a little bit better on the underside. You can see there's a slight gap there. Now the Sopwith Camel has additional rigging to the wings, from the fuselage to the top wing and the bottom wing to the top wing and so on. There are 2 pieces of rigging on the front and then 1 on the back. So I've got 2 of these pieces lined up, and I put them onto the glue that I'd put on. This is just regular medium thickness super glue. What I actually ended up doing was getting a bottle of accelerator, and later on in the video I'll show you how I used that. It made everything go so much faster. So I pulled it straight, put the accelerator on, and literally like that, it's done, and you're ready to cut it off. It really does set almost immediately. Landing gear wire, I put a little drop of super glue on the lower part of the fuselage, and pushed the rigging into it, and then I put some super glue on the bottom end where it's supposed to attach, and let it fall into place. And once I'm holding it in place, then I would then just gently dab it with the accelerator, and it worked out perfectly. Now it's time to glue the inline braces or struts into place, and this was done into the 2 little holes on each side of the fuselage. This is the right section, and here is the one for the left. If you're having trouble getting it to stick, you do need to scrape out the paint, but as long as one side has some plastic visible, it will stick usually reasonably well. Now, before I have this dry, I am lining it up with that top wing because I want to make sure that it's in the correct place. So it's now all dry and the top wing is glued in. Here you can see I'm holding the rigging straight and then gluing it into place, and then just touching it with that accelerator liquid, and it glues instantaneously. It really has changed how I've done rigging, and now I don't mind it as much, but you can see I did rip out a piece. Now we're back to making parts again. Here we've got the wheels, and sanding off those extra pieces. The wheels do have a little hole on the side of them. It's supposed to be there, and you can see I'm just drilling that out. It doesn't have to be deep. It's a very superficial little hole. It really doesn't have to be deep, but it just adds some detail here. Now I'm spraying the insides the green color, and then the outsides are being painted white, and we'll put that red decal on that when it dries. Hand painting the tires here, probably could have sprayed them, but they seemed so small, and as you can see, it ended up being a bit wobbly. There wasn't a good line there that I was hoping for. I painted it with the Tamiya rubber black color because it's more of a charcoal gray color. Once that's dry, I put these decals on. I actually probably should have just trimmed these decals because they didn't stick too well. And once they were dry with all these softening solutions, I did cut out the little hole. And then it's time to mount them. So I use super glue to mount these because they both have paint on them. And now I'm making the final rigging here. I put a little piece of super glue to make this little pod that sits in between the rigging there, and I'm painting the inside struts that same brown color. And you gotta be very careful because now you're working with all these extra little rigging pieces that can come off very easy. You've got to paint one section and then move to the other side. So this is the regular brown color. Also painting the rigging now with black. Took a long time to make all the rigging, and also it's taking a long time to paint all the rigging. It really was quite painful to do, but it ends up with a very nice looking result. So this is just with regular black Vallejo primer. Having to do this in all different angles, as you can see here, and paint all different sides of this rigging. You can use just black thread, which then doesn't need to be painted, but it's not as smooth unless you get sort of a specialized rigging line. But ended up looking okay. Now the top side of that strut was part of the wing and also should have been linen colored. Because I put all the rigging, I couldn't fill that area. It's not something that's very obviously visible. Now when that's all done, it's time to seal the model, and I did this with a matte clear coat, and that seals in all the paint and the decals as well, top and bottom. Make sure you get all the little creases. It's very difficult to do this by hand with a brush, so I just spray it on. Once that's all done, now it's time to do some weathering. And probably should have done a gloss first because the weathering did stick a little bit to it, which it tends to do with the matte. Here I am using the Tamiya panel line accent. It's an enamel-based accent color, and I put this over most of the creases, and then once that's dry, you really have to wait for it to dry, then you can remove it. So as you can see here, we've got some very nice panel lines on some parts, and especially around the engine and the cowling. It did show up quite nicely, and then I will then use a Q-tip. You'll see this now. I use a Q-tip with some enamel thinners. I use the Tamiya enamel thinners because that's what they recommend for their enamel-based panel line accent. So this removes the extra and leaves a very thin line of it in the panel line, but you can also paint this on different places and make it look dirty for some additional weathering. But this is the final touches here. If you want, you can seal it again afterwards. I didn't do that, but here is the finished model.
you.